So I had the most hateful experience last night, and I'm gonna tell you why. Because this dude, and he sat down, and I was just like, I heard, him clear his throat. And I've seen that with a lot of men to get your attention or whatever. I'm in a hostel, so a lot of people like to hook up and just do stupid stuff. And we ended up having a conversation. He started off all over my church, and then it led into him trying to get me to have a conversation about sex. And I'm sitting here telling you that I literally am a believer in Christ, and I don't agree with hooking up. Like, I don't know how many times I said this, and I guess he thought he could just say whatever, and then I was just going to cave, which, that might be the case for a lot of people. I mean, you might have had that experience where women say no, and then they cave. But, I look at it as a hate act, all right? It's a hate crime when you believe that a woman's only, job is to hook up with you. Now, this dude was from Egypt, right? And I met Egyptians before. I've never had a problem with any Egyptians because I lived in Nashville. And Nashville is full of Egyptians, but it's a lot of Muslim Egyptians. And what's funny about that situation is I didn't know they were actually Arabs living in Egypt. But he kept saying, oh no, I'm Egyptian. And I was like, why does he keep saying that? And then someone told me later, oh well, they're like Muslims and they're trying to pretend like they're Egyptian. So this guy I actually think was a descendant of the Egyptians, but he was like very fair skinned. But the way his features were, I was like, it don't look like the Muslim features, right? The Arab features. He had a weird look about him. Like every time I looked at him, I was like, Count Chocula, Count Chocula. Like his eyebrows, like Count Chocula, like pointy type deal, and he had a real low, like. I was like, this dude don't even look right. And then what was funny about it is this morning I'm on Facebook and I'm scrolling through, and one of the groups or pages, it talks about the god, the Egyptian god of sex, fertility, etc. And I was like, I don't know if the man was possessed by this, because it felt like abnormally sexual, like, you're disgusting, quit talking to me, sexual, like, stop. I had to cut off the conversation, and I'm like, I'm going to bed. There's nothing attractive about you, and never will be. And I should have stopped the conversation when we were talking about God, and then I said God has given me a vision of my husband. Anytime a man tries to go around that, and they're claiming God, they're not taking God seriously. They should love you enough to be happy that God gave you a vision of your husband and that you will be married. There's only been one man so far that has said, well, I wouldn't want to get in the way of that. Only one. So it shows you how selfish and self-focused many of these men are. They are losing. So, wanted to bring that up, but also there's something going on with these BHIs, all right, the Black Hebrew Israelites. I think God is just awakening people up to the falsehood of it more. First off, I'm getting annoyed by the pitting, right? There's like a constant pitting of the church against BHI when neither one of the groups are right, all right? God is right alone. But, this morning, there was a BHI girl, she was calling the white women in the chat mayonnaise and all this. And while I don't agree with a lot of what white people do and all this kind of stuff, a lot of these BHI are acting like they're righteous solely because they're black, and that's not true. And they're acting like they are Israel solely because they're black, and that's not true either. And they're making up doctrines. Oh, Esau's a white man, and nobody can seem to prove that, and nobody can seem to answer the question of how Jacob was black and Esau was white, and Esau had two black parents. Nobody can seem to answer these questions, and it's very frustrating. And then when you don't want to back down, they want to sit there and call you a Jezebel and talk about where your husband is and all this kind of nonsense. And it's like, they're building up wrath for themselves at this point. Another girl, she gets on and she's all like, well, women are not supposed to wear pants. That's what that verse is about. And it's like, no, that's not what that verse is about. It's about cross-dressing, okay? God has shown me in pants in visions on several occasions because it's about authority. All right? That's why the Levites were given pants. So there were men back then that were wearing tunics, no pants, and there were women back then wearing tunics, no pants. So with that said, you're basing these things off a false premise. And on top of that, t-shirts were initially for men only. All right, heels first worn by men, tights first worn by men, eyeliner first worn by men. So if that's the case, then you have to give up all those things as well, since you are stating that, you know, we're not supposed to cross-dress, or you're stating that we're not supposed to wear pants. It's about not cross-dressing. That means not taking the effort to purposely look like the opposite sex in mannerisms, dress, whatever. But they keep repeating these doctrines that they get from their camp elders. That's why I had to tell this girl, I'm like, because she said, she responded with, oh, well, Christ will come and he'll tell us everything. And I'm like, you can literally ask God right now what the truth is. And why don't you know that? Because you keep going to your elders and you keep going to your husband who's claiming to be righteous but isn't. And that brings up another point. There's this couple, they're called the better halves. The guy is rubbing me the wrong way, and I think he's rubbing a lot of the women the wrong way, because I feel like people can see through to his aggressiveness toward his wife. A lot of these BHI men want to be served, all right, they think that they're the man, but none of them seem to be able to actually be a man like Christ, and that's what's very concerning, because this is very few and far in between, right? I even think some of the men in the church are doing a better job at being Christ-like than a lot of the BHI who claim that they're Israel and that they're righteous. First off, if you're righteous, you probably would not be claiming that you're righteous. And you don't have to announce it. People are going to know by your behavior. They're going to know by how you act, what you do, and what you say. So they have these videos and then they do these demonstrations, you know, of how a husband and a wife should treat one another. But it just is not sitting right with me. And the fact that she has these black circles under her eyes in some of these videos is making me nervous. Not that he's hitting her, but that she's stressed, right? I remember there was a girl, I was going to this Anabaptist church in Missouri, and she just looked sickly and dead, and she's like, I gotta be quiet in the church. Her husband was the pastor. He would say stuff, oh, women can't preach in the church, and I would do it on purpose, because I'm like, look, you ain't about to sit here and try to shut my mouth when God's telling me to say something because I'm a woman. You don't know what you're talking about. So he actually ended up getting in trouble a couple months later for beating her. So we're dealing with a lot of those kinds of men that are in these BHI camps, these men that have decided that they are above their wives to the point where they can just be abusive verbally, mentally, emotionally, if they cannot be physically. And that's what's going on with a lot of these folks. I met a girl, she was from Trinidad and Tobago, and she went to the IUIC in New York, and she was married to one of the guys, and she said a lot of those men were really abusive to those women, and she was hoping like some of them would get divorced because they weren't evenly yoked. And then on top of that, these men are claiming to be Israel, and some of them are not Israel at all. If you were actually submitted to God, you would not be in a camp. I'm sorry. You would be going wherever the Spirit leads you to go. That's why you got some people that are on YouTube and Facebook right now that are saying, look, I was in the camps and I'm glad that I'm no longer there. God let me out. You don't need a gang to follow God. All right. And really the camps were the camps of the Levites, the camps of Judah, the camps of Ephraim. Maybe not Levi, because I think Levi was kind of throughout. But Reuben, Simeon. It had nothing to do with IUIC versus ISUC. Nothing to do with that. You're a glorified religious wannabe gang. That's what you want to be. And you're about to get dealt with by God. You need to repent ASAP. And a lot of the women in these camps too, you're not even Israelites either. Some of you guys are Canaanites. Some of you guys are Edomites. Some of you guys are other types of Hamites and Shemites. And the nasty attitudes that many of you women have because you have exalted yourself into thinking that you're righteous just because you're wearing a long skirt, some tzitzit, and a head covering. Nasty attitudes, many of you, Jezebel spirits. All right, you're not exalted just because some men come to you and tell you that, oh sis, you so righteous. And this brings up another thing. One of these girls, lovely cook. All right, she makes a delicious looking thing. It is bothering me a bit that you take the Feast of Unleavened Bread as a means to just cook every unleavened thing that you can. Unleavened brownies, unleavened this, unleavened that. Can we keep it simple? Something just is not sitting right with me, because you're more concerned about what you're eating than what you're actually supposed to be doing for unleavened bread, which is removing the leaven of sin from your home. That's what it's about. It's not just about going into the cabinet and taking out the baking soda and the yeast and, oh, let's try to find clever ways to make different types of breads and different types of brownies and these kinds of things. No. It is a time for you to do some self-reflection, a time for you to examine the sin in your life, all right? Because truth be told, this feast is a blessing. And when you do it the right way, then you will notice a change in your life. All right? But then you have people all up in the comments, oh sis, that looks so great, oh sis, and saying other things too. There was another Black Hebrew Israelite woman that got on, and she had like all these pictures of herself, right? And it was clear she had this kind of seductive spirit on her. And one of the girls is like, oh sis, I didn't know you were thick. I'm like, why are you talking about her body? Like, why is that a righteous thing to do? And it's thickness. Man judges by appearance, God judges by the heart. Proverbs 31, beauty is vain, but a woman who fears the Lord. Is thickness something that's going to deliver this girl? Because I had to tell her, because I went through some of her other Facebook profile pictures. She has a problem with vanity. Deep. And I feel bad for her, because where God brought me from with this vanity thing, you just don't even understand. And I'm not perfect by any means concerning letting go of the vanity. But at the end of the day, it's a sickness. It is a self-rejection, all right? That's what it is. So I said something. I don't think she ever responded, and they often don't, but then they call themselves righteous women. So that happened, and then, you know, so these, what were they, ISUP? I don't know. They be dressing in these crazy outfits. I'll be trying to figure out who's making these outfits, because I'm like, some of it's actually really, I mean, you could do some costume design for real. But, you know, one of the girls, I guess one of the guys in the photo was her husband. She's like, oh, he looks so sexy. And I'm like, y'all just sound so worldly. Why are you in the comments talking about your man looks sexy? Why are you in the comments talking about homegirl look thick? You're worldly. Like I said, wearing a long skirt and some tzitzit is not what makes you righteous. You need to sit down before the Lord and learn from Him immediately, because you're learning from these men that are literally, they're not even sitting before the Lord. So, bitch, you need to do something, because I feel like my ears are a little open right now, and I'm hearing everything that's just not of God, and it's a lot of stuff, and they will not give it up. Their pride will not let them give it up. But you got to understand, there's going to come a time where if you don't give it up, God is going to do a 1-2 on you. So anyway, y'all be blessed.